The mahogany table stretched endlessly across the room, polished to a shine so deep it reflected the chandelier's light like water. Around it sat the people who shared my blood, but not my heart. My father's will reading had been scheduled for this afternoon, and though the lawyer tried to keep it professional, the air already buzzed with something darker: greed, rivalry, and the certainty that I, the invisible one, wouldn't walk away with anything. I arrived last, and the moment I stepped into the room, every pair of eyes turned toward me. My older brother smirked, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. My aunt whispered something behind her hand, and my cousins chuckled softly. I could feel it before I even sat down. The mockery had already begun. "Didn't think you'd bother showing up," my brother said. His voice carried just enough volume for the whole table to hear. I didn't answer. I'd learned long ago that my silence was their favorite weapon against me. They mistook it for weakness. What they didn't know was that silence can also be armor. The lawyer, a man with silver hair and calm eyes, shuffled his papers and cleared his throat. "If we can all take our seats, we'll begin shortly." I slid into the chair at the far end of the table, the seat no one else had wanted. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was always at the end, always on the outside, always watching the family's performance as though I didn't belong in it. As the lawyer prepared, I let my eyes wander. My sister adjusted her diamond bracelet, a gift she had flaunted countless times. My uncle leaned in to whisper to his son, both grinning like they already knew the outcome. Laughter rippled softly through the room, subtle but sharp, and though no one said it aloud, I could hear the unspoken words. "You won't get anything. You were never the favorite. Father left you nothing." And maybe they were right. For most of my life, I had been treated like the afterthought, my successes ignored, my failures magnified. My father, strict and silent, rarely expressed his thoughts openly, and because of that, the others believed he hadn't cared for me. They believed the inheritance would follow the same pattern of their favoritism, but I remembered something they didn't. Late nights, when the house was quiet and the world was asleep, my father and I would sometimes share a moment, brief but unforgettable. He would sit in his chair, a book in his hand, and I would sit nearby, not speaking, just being there. Sometimes he'd look at me and nod slightly, as if to say, "I see you. You matter." He never said the words, but I felt them. That's what gave me the courage to walk into this room today, even knowing their laughter was waiting. The lawyer finally spoke. His voice was steady, professional, but it carried weight. "We are gathered today to review the last will and testament of your father. I will read it in full as per his request." He adjusted his glasses, and the room fell silent, anticipation crackling like static in the air. Before he could continue, my cousin snickered. "This should be good," my brother grinned, leaning forward. "Don't get your hopes up," he said, looking directly at me. "You know he never trusted you with anything important." The laughter that followed was quiet, but it cut deeper than any scream. I clenched my hands in my lap, nails digging into my palms. For a moment I wanted to defend myself, to shout that they didn't know the truth, that they had no idea what my father truly thought of me. But then I remembered Carl Jung's words, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." I didn't need their validation. My father's truth, whatever it was, would speak for itself soon enough. The lawyer cleared his throat again, louder this time, silencing the room. "I will now begin." As he opened the first page, the weight of every unspoken tension in the room pressed down on me. Their laughter still lingered, but underneath it I felt something else, an undercurrent of fear, because deep down they knew. They knew my father was a man of surprises, and in his final words, he would not be mocked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began to read. His tone was steady, practiced, but the words carried the weight of a man no longer present. "My father. In the matter of my estate," he started, his voice formal, precise. My brother smirked, leaning back in his chair like he was already victorious. My sister smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. A cousin nudged another, whispering something under his breath. The quiet chuckles spread through the room like a disease, and then came the first blow. "To my eldest son," the lawyer read, "I leave the summer house with all its belongings." A satisfied laugh escaped my brother's lips. "As expected," he said smugly, his eyes flicking toward me. The implication was clear. "You see, father trusted me, not you." The lawyer continued, "To my daughter, I leave the collection of jewelry passed down from her grandmother and a portion of the family trust." My sister gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in fake modesty. "Oh, father," she whispered, but her eyes shone with greed. The room erupted in whispers, each relative buzzing with excitement, tallying what they thought would soon be theirs. I sat silent at the far end of the table. Every gift so far confirmed their belief. I was the forgotten one. My aunt leaned toward me, her voice dripping with poison. "Don't take it too hard, dear. You were never much of a priority." Laughter rippled again, cruel and careless. And for a moment it stung, because they weren't entirely wrong. For years I had been overlooked, dismissed, ignored. I had walked through family gatherings like a ghost, present but unseen. To them, my father's silence meant absence. To them, my lack of privilege meant lack of worth. But they misunderstood silence. Carl Jung wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." My father's silence wasn't absence, it was order, and I had a feeling he was about to prove it. The lawyer cleared his throat again, as if sensing the weight of the moment. The room hushed. Papers rustled. "And to my youngest child," he began. Every head turned toward me. The smirks widened. My cousin snorted, unable to contain himself. This should be good. I braced myself for another insult disguised as inheritance. Perhaps a token, a scrap, a reminder that I didn't matter. Maybe a photograph. Maybe nothing at all. The lawyer looked up, his eyes lingering on me for a beat too long, and then he continued. "To my youngest, the one many of you underestimated, I leave not scraps, not tokens, but the very heart of my estate." The laughter died instantly. Gasps filled the room. My brother sat up straighter, his smile fading. My sister's hand fell limply from her bracelet. The cousins who had been whispering were now silent, their eyes wide. The lawyer's voice grew firmer. "It is my wish that the one who was mocked in life shall stand tallest in my legacy. To my youngest child I leave control of the company, the main estate, and my final letter to be read aloud." Silence. Heavy, suffocating, absolute. The smirks were gone. The laughter was gone. Every ounce of superiority had been drained from their faces, and in that silence I felt something shift. All the years of being invisible, all the nights of feeling small, all the whispers that I was nothing, suddenly inverted. Their laughter had turned into disbelief, their arrogance into rage, their certainty into humiliation. The lawyer placed the letter on the table. His eyes softened as he looked at me. "Your father wanted this read last," he said quietly. My heart pounded. I could feel the fury building around me, my brother's fists clenched, my sister's lip trembling, my aunt's face pale with shock. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. And my father's voice, even in death, was about to make sure they never laughed at me again. The lawyer held the envelope delicately, as though it carried not just ink on paper, but the final breath of a man whose presence still filled the room. He adjusted his glasses, glanced at me once more, and began to read. "My dear child," the letter began, his voice steady but heavy with weight. "I know that as you sit in this room, you feel the eyes of many upon you. Some filled with doubt, some with mockery, some with jealousy. I also know you are not surprised. You grew up surrounded by those looks, and yet you stayed true to yourself. A murmur rippled through the room. My brother scoffed, shifting in his seat, but his bravado was cracking. The lawyer continued. You were not the loudest. You were not the most praised. You were not the one they celebrated at every turn. But you were the one who sat with me when the nights grew long. You were the one who asked me questions no one else cared to ask. You were the one who carried kindness when others carried greed. And though you did not know it, I was always watching. My throat tightened. Memories flooded me. Quiet evenings at his side. Me reading while he worked, the way he sometimes placed his hand on mine without words. They hadn't been meaningless. He had noticed. He had seen me all along. The lawyer's voice grew firmer as he read. I leave you my estate not because you demanded it, but because you never did. I leave you my company not because you are the strongest, but because you understand what strength truly is. Responsibility. And I leave you my name, not because you chased it, but because you honored it in silence. The room was still. My sister's eyes brimmed with tears, tears not of sadness, but of fury. My brother's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. My aunt shook her head, muttering under her breath. The lawyer read on. To the rest of you, my family, you may laugh, you may contest, you may rage against this decision, but know this, I chose deliberately. I saw what each of you valued most in this life. Some valued wealth, some valued appearances, some valued control. But this child, this one you mocked, valued love, honesty, and truth, and so I leave everything that mattered most to me in their hands. The silence broke. This is ridiculous, my brother shouted, slamming his fist against the table. He was old, confused, manipulated. The lawyer raised his hand. The will is ironclad. Your father left no room for contest. Every document is notarized, every choice deliberate. There is nothing you can do. My sister shot up from her chair. You don't deserve any of it. She spat at me, her voice shaking. You were always weak. Father pitied you, that's all this is. But her words didn't sting anymore, because my father's voice, through ink, through paper, through the lawyer's trembling lips, had already given me everything I had ever needed. Recognition. Carl Jung wrote, The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. For years, my family had told me I was nothing, that I was weak, that I was invisible. But in that moment, my father's words reminded me who I truly was. Not invisible, not weak, chosen. The lawyer placed the letter down gently. Those were your father's final words. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Anger, disbelief, accusations hurled like weapons. My brother threatened lawsuits. My sister demanded explanations. My aunt cried out about fairness. But through it all I sat still, because for the first time in my life I didn't need to defend myself. My father had already done it for me. The room erupted like a storm. My brother was the first to explode, his chair screeching across the floor as he stood, towering, fists clenched. "This is a lie!" he shouted. "He would never leave the company to you. You've done nothing. You've achieved nothing. You were always the weakest." My sister joined in, her voice sharp and venomous. "You manipulated him somehow. You must have. How else would Father overlook all of us? We've been here, we've worked, we've sacrificed. And you? What have you ever given him?" The cousins muttered among themselves, some angry, others pale with fear that their shares would be smaller than expected. My aunt sobbed into her handkerchief, wailing about betrayal. It was chaos. The lawyer sat quietly, his hands folded, waiting for the storm to pass. He had expected this. He had seen it before. Greed always roared the loudest when truth was spoken. I sat still, my hands resting calmly in my lap. For the first time, their words didn't pierce me. They bounced off like arrows hitting steel, because my father's voice still lingered in the air, steady, undeniable. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For years I let their scorn direct me. I believed their laughter was fate, that their rejection was proof of my unworthiness. But now the unconscious had been made conscious. The truth was spoken, and I was no longer their scapegoat. My brother pointed a shaking finger at me. "Say something! Don't just sit there like a coward." I looked at him, at all of them, and finally I spoke. "You always mistook my silence for weakness, but silence isn't weakness. It's patience, and patience always reveals the truth." The room stilled for a moment. My voice, calm and steady, cut through the noise sharper than their shouts ever could. "You laughed at me," I continued. "You whispered that I was nothing. You told yourselves that Father didn't care for me, but the truth is he saw me. He saw everything you ignored, and now his words are louder than your laughter." My sister scoffed, crossing her arms. "Do you really think this makes you strong? You've inherited responsibility you can't handle. You'll collapse under the weight." I met her glare without flinching. Maybe I'll stumble, maybe I'll struggle. But strength isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's about carrying on, even when no one believes in you. That's something I learned in the shadows you pushed me into. Gasps echoed around the table. Some family members shifted uncomfortably, realizing my words were not just defiance, they were truth. The lawyer finally spoke, his voice firm. "The will is legally binding. Contest it if you wish, but you will lose. Your father made sure of it. His decision was deliberate." My brother slammed his fist against the table, but the sound rang hollow now. His rage was a performance, and everyone knew it. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. My legs trembled, but my voice was strong. "I didn't need this inheritance to know my worth. I've lived without your approval my whole life, and I'll live without it still. But now you will never laugh at me again, not because of the money, not because of the estate, but because I finally see myself clearly, and nothing you say can take that away." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And in that moment, standing tall in the chaos of their fury, I finally became. The lawyer nodded, gathering the papers. "We are done here." And just like that, it was over. The storm of their rage still swirled behind me as I walked out of the room, but I carried something far greater than their fury: freedom. When I stepped out of that room, the air felt different, lighter. Behind me, voices still rose, angry, bitter, desperate. My family clawed at the fragments of the life they thought was theirs, arguing over scraps, over illusions of control. But I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trapped by their noise. I walked through the hall, each step steady, the lawyer's words echoing in my mind. But louder still were my father's. "You were always seen. You were always enough." The marble floor reflected the light from the high windows, and in that reflection I saw myself, not the shadow they had painted me as, not the weak one, not the forgotten one. I saw the truth, and it was liberating. That night I sat alone in my room, the letter still in my hands. I read it again, slowly, letting every word carve itself into my memory. My father had known me better than I thought. He had seen the parts of me no one else cared to look at. He had trusted me with everything, not because of appearances, not because of favoritism, but because he knew my heart. Carl Jung said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." My father had forced me to awaken. And in that awakening, I realized something powerful. The inheritance was not the money or the estate or the company. The inheritance was the recognition. The inheritance was the dignity I had been denied my whole life. The next days were not easy. The phone calls came, filled with threats and pleas. My brother promised lawsuits. My sister begged for reconsideration. My aunt accused me of betrayal. The cousins spread rumors, twisting the story to paint me as manipulative, deceitful, lucky. But through it all, I stayed calm, because I knew the truth, and the truth is untouchable. One afternoon, I returned to the estate, walking through the halls of the house I had grown up in. I touched the banister my father used to hold, the desk where he worked late into the night, the chair where he once sat with me in silence. Every room held memories, but they no longer hurt. They no longer whispered that I was less. Instead, they reminded me I belonged. I sat in his chair, the same chair that had once seemed so far above me, and whispered, "Thank you." For years I had carried the wound of invisibility. For years their laughter had shaped me, but now I carried something else, his faith. That was the true inheritance. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated your whole life, only to realize one day that you were stronger than anyone imagined? Have you ever carried the weight of laughter, only to rise above it when the truth finally revealed itself? If you have, then you know the freedom I felt, because the moment I stopped needing their approval, I became untouchable. Yes, they laughed at me. Yes, they mocked me. Yes, they told me I was nothing. But my father's final words silenced them all, and in that silence I found my voice. So I walked away from the estate, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I am not what they said I was. I am not the shadow they tried to cast over me. I am not invisible. I am what my father always knew I was. I am enough. I am chosen. I am free. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been laughed at, underestimated, or mocked, only to prove them wrong in the end? Subscribe for more stories of heartbreak, healing, and triumph. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The truth has a way of silencing every laugh, every insult, every doubt. And I'll leave you with Jung's words one last time. The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. They tried to tell me I was nothing, but my father's final words told me who I truly am.